Welcome back to PR After Hours. I'm your host, Alex Greenwood, bringing you your weekly cocktail of PR and marketing tips that will help you and your business. Hey, welcome back to Season 2 of PR After Hours. Glad to have you back in the virtual lounge. We have a fantastic guest getting ready for you, warmed up over there with his virtual teenie. We'll get to him right after these messages. Hello, listeners. It's me, Alex, from PR After Hours. I hope you're enjoying the show so far. And I wanted to talk to you just for a moment about the way I get this show right into your earbuds every week. It's because I use Anchor FM. Now, I've told you previously that I've been podcasting since 2006, back when we used stone knives and bear skins and a couple of Dixie cups and string. Anchor FM has really streamlined this and made it simpler for people who don't know the first thing about setting up a podcast or don't have, time to learn all the pro tools and stuff, because it's all right here. First thing that's important to know is it's free. There are certain tools that will allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone or computer. Anchor will then distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more. That's huge. Distribution is a big pain in the butt, to be honest with you, so it's really great Anchor FM can do that for you, and you're not paying hosting fees. That adds up every month. It's everything you need to make a podcast all in one place, so download the free Anchor app or go to Anchor FM to get started, and be sure to join me in the virtual cocktail lounge on PR After Hours. Creativity is probably one of the most underrated things in the world of business, at least in my opinion. But I think I got somebody here who might even kind of agree. He is Nir Bashan. He is the author of The Creator Mindset, which is a brand new book. And he is a world-renowned creativity expert. And he's taught thousands of leaders and individuals around the globe how to harness the power of creativity to improve profitability, increase sales, improve customer service, and ultimately create more meaning in their work. He's been working on this stuff for over 2 decades. He's got a list of credits a mile long. I'll put all the links in the show notes because I don't want to waste a moment with Nir. He's kind of on the book promotion trail. He just released this book. It's going great guns. Be watching the link on Amazon. You're going to see my review of this book shortly. But let's not waste another moment. Nir Bashan, welcome to the virtual lounge.
Thanks, Alex. Very excited to be here.
So let's jump right in there, my friend.
Yeah.
Creativity. And of course, crisis communication planning is a huge part of my business, and I talk about it often here on the show. Let's get into that. How can creativity work in a crisis situation?
So in crisis, I find, especially in times like today, Alex, creativity can be the sort of, the link between dealing with a crisis effectively and getting completely, drowned out and incredibly overwhelmed by whatever that crisis is. Creativity allows us to come up with ideas that are generally not the norm. They're not part and parcel to a quote unquote normal reaction. And what I argue that, Alex, and I know that you do too, is that in a time of crisis, normal doesn't work anymore. And it's amazing to me how many people look to that sort of lexicon of established procedure when something goes wrong, COVID or a miscommunication, or today, some race issue where, a kid calls, another kid some, horrible name, and, maybe they're children and they don't really understand what they're doing. Yeah, okay, they're in high school or whatnot, but maybe they don't know what they're doing. And, I don't know, maybe they do. And it's just one of these horrible things that needs to be dealt with in a different way. That different way is not going to come from sort of a traditional way of thinking. It's going to come from a creative way of thinking. So I push for creativity to help people understand what the crisis is and what could possibly be used to help solve it.
I want to quote from the book really quickly, and then I want to go right back into crisis here. But, you're getting into the book here, and Nir says this, and I love how this is written so conversationally. By the way, this is a business book that doesn't read like a damn textbook, and I'm all for that. I mean, that's what I love here.
Thanks, sir.
Okay. So here's what Nir says. He says, now I know what you're thinking. This creative stuff is neat, but how can it help me in my business? I have real deadlines, real inventory, real customers, and I need a plan on how to grow and improve my business in order to achieve very specific goals. And none of these goals are quote, creative, unquote. They are real physical objectives and thus need to be treated with gravity. But this is where Nir brings in the heat. He says, but I'm here to argue that no matter what your goals are, without creativity, you're merely operating your business like anyone else, set in the analytical without the benefit of the creative. And no matter how optimal your thinking is, you are running the business at 50% of your achievable or of your available brain power. Think about that for a minute. You are running your business on, at best, only half of your potential. Would you accept an invoice paid for 50% of the full amount, or a vendor delivering 50% of the job, or half your paycheck? Of course not. I know you wouldn't, and neither would I, but that's exactly what you're doing today and every day as you neglect 50% of your brain. Now is the time to activate it. So let's get moving. Unquote. That gets right back to it, Nir. And I love this about your concept is, especially when you're talking about crisis, so many times people, I see this all the time,
Yeah.
and usually I don't have the benefit of working with them ahead of time like I'd like to. I'm there batting cleanup, I'm the
Right.
janitor, but
Yeah, literally.
you see where they have like ticked box A, box B, box C, and it's so cookie cutter, so seemingly insincere, so inauthentic, it does more harm than good. Your supposition is, and I totally agree, creative approaches should be examined around every specific, unique incidence of a crisis situation.
Absolutely. And in that examining of everything creatively, ideas are generated that were never there before. And those ideas allow you to effectively engage um, through the crisis in a way that looks authentic to people. There's nothing worse than ticking the box of a traditional sort of response to crisis, right?
Right.
Some kid goes to some restaurant and, eats something and gets sick, right? So you have sort of a corporate structure of response, right? The first thing is, send an email. Don't apologize because we don't want
Right.
the lawyer to. Third step is, it's a construct that is set up by analytics. And what ends up happening is the analytics separate us from our emotional ability to respond to something in a way that makes sense to people. The Tylenol case study is one of the best, and I talk
Right.
about it in the book. So what happened is in 1982, some wacko poisoned Tylenol with cyanide. And a lot of people got sick, and some people tragically died. What happened was, Tylenol, instead of getting a bunch of lawyers in a room and saying,
Right.
okay, what should we do legally to protect ourselves, was like, what should we do that would be the right thing to do? And how do we authentically and creatively respond? So what did they do, Alex? They set up a 1-800 number right away and staffed it with people and literally told people that called. Today you would do it on an app or whatever, but back then it was 1982. Before this stuff, they literally told people that would call in, we don't know what's going on. We're trying to find out. And people would say, well, I'm in, Kansas City. It has is my Tylenol poisonous? I don't know. They would say, I don't know. We recommend you throwing it out. We'll send you a coupon to get a new one when we could figure it out. Their CEO was on TV every night saying, we're trying, we're working, I don't know what's going on. And that vulnerability, that lack of pretense, that honesty came across incredibly well. And yes, some people died, and that's a very, very horrible thing. But out of that, the ashes of crisis can come amazing innovation and amazing potential of innovation. What ended up happening was that Tylenol developed the first, bottle seal, so that medicine is now sealed. I mean, you can't even buy, a tub of cottage cheese without a seal on it. Everything has a seal today. So when you're in a market, and you're shopping and you see a product that's sealed, you can thank the 1982 Tylenol crisis. Thank Johnson & Johnson for sealing stuff, because that's where it came from. It didn't come from a lawyer. It didn't come from the traditional ticking boxes of crisis. It came from real innovative and creative thinking. The CEO at the time and leadership said, time out, we have a responsibility to people to ensure that they're healthy and well. Our products are, for the benefit of people, and we need to respond in a similar way. I really implore your listeners to start to think about their businesses and their, whatever their product and service is, and enough of the, traditional response, enough of going to the lawyers and saying, what would least likely get us sued?
Right.
Yeah, it might least likely get you sued, but it also might eventually sink your product. Case in point, within 6 weeks of the Tylenol crisis, 6 or 8 weeks, so 2 months after this wacko poisoned the Tylenol, um, they found the culprit and fixed the problem with the seals, and Tylenol became the best-selling product around the world within 2 months of this crisis. You tell me of one crisis that's happened, in the last several years here, where somebody's not only bounced back but became, an incredible, celebrated type of product as a result of going through a crisis. It doesn't happen a lot because of the normal sort of analytical response. It's time to get creative and understand that, it's okay to communicate with people. It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to put some ideas out there and say that I don't know everything, and together uncover and, you know, pass through the crisis together.
Yeah, the Johnson family, the leadership CEO, he basically all the lawyers said, "Don't do that, don't do that," and he said, "Wait, that's not our values. That's not who we are."
Right.
So, as you say in the book, trust and humility are tools your career or your company can implement with creativity, and that's just what they did there. And PR folks, especially listening to the show, will know we all run afoul of the lawyers in situations like this, and it's not intentional. It's always the lawyer's job to do what? Limit exposure, limit legal exposure. You don't want to get in trouble there, but it's always the PR person's job to what? Convey that you're human, you're authentic, and you're real. So there's always that issue. That's why I always tell my clients, listeners, that if you're planning your crisis comp, please make sure your corporate counsel is involved in some way or another. It's not enough sometimes, especially with a larger company, just to have your HR director on board. That's great. You should get a lawyer in the room so they have a comfort level and understand when the shiz hits the fan, this is how PR wants to operate, and they can have some input and they will feel less defensive when that crisis situation inevitably drops on you. Nir, you said something earlier. It's so interesting. You said this about potentially a crisis where, a kid in high school uses a social app and says something racially insensitive. That
Yeah.
literally came across my desk a few months ago.
Oh, wow.
Literally. And parents mortified, the whole situation. I can't really go much further than that, other than to say that these things are much more common than people understand. And some people hear this and go, well, that's a family problem. Not really, especially if the parents of that kid are what? Executives in an important company or big
Okay.
donors
Yeah.
to
Of
something,
course.
right? So moving back into this, Nir, on the creative angle, what kind of tools can they find in the book? And in particular, what advice would you give PR people in trying to sell this to clients about making creative responses? You've already said some wonderful things about a good example with Johnson and Johnson, but are there other things they should kind of keep in their quiver?
Yeah, it really is about feeling a sense of empathy. And no matter what the situation is, it's very, very, very difficult to feel empathy for people, especially when the transgression doesn't align with your values.
Right.
But that, it's sort of the beauty of the job, right? The beauty of the job is like a lawyer that defends, somebody who committed some, reprehensible crime or whatnot. That is the beauty of our system, that we can be impartial to people, and provide that service, that product and service, so that we can value the system. Sometimes the system and the way that it's set up is more important than violating it with some sense of taking judgment. So I think that once we look at the world through the lens of, the shoe on the other foot, we can then really start to uncover very customized solutions for particular cases in PR and in crisis management especially. And those particular situations will become authentic because they are true to what they are. Like the Johnson & Johnson case, the values were more important than anything else of that company. And once you can find the values, I think you can align to something that gets people behind the message. And I think that is a very important and worthwhile road to take.
Yeah, and what Nir talks about, and I'll just kind of go through the bullet points in this section of the book just to remind you of this, and then when you buy the book, you go look for it in chapter 18. But his lessons and his advice are: be vulnerable, number one, right? Be vulnerable, just like Johnson and Johnson did. They said, I don't know. Number two, restore trust at all costs. We don't know. We're working on it. Here's a coupon. We'll get it to you when things are fixed, right? That's number two. Number three, communicate, right? Setting up that 1-800 number, whereas, as Nir said, right, you'd have an app today, or definitely on your website, definitely in your social media. You know, you'd have all these things. Don't go dark on social when a crisis. Now, suspend all your usual selling and happy talk.
Right, yes.
Don't just turn off your social.
No,
I tell clients this all the time.
do not go dark.
Do not go dark. Create innovation is number four. I mean, there's just so many other tips here in the book, but I just think that these are the things it's easy to lose sight of in the midst of a crisis, which is particularly why I am advocate and a huge advocate of planning ahead. And that's why I have several clients right now. Thank heavens, Nir. By the way, I don't know if the last time we talked, I might have mentioned to you that things got a little slack with COVID, but people are waking up and they're realizing they need crisis planning. That's exciting. And I hope you don't mind, but I drop your name now when I'm training clients. And I mention this book because I so believe in your approach.
Oh, cool. I really appreciate that. Yeah, those are the four sort of principles that you've mentioned that'll help you get through anything. But what I want your listeners to do is not apply it sort of all up. Okay, Nir, I got those four tools. I want them to apply it to themselves. And the way that you, Alex, and your practice applied these things is not the same way that the next guy over there or the next gal over there will practice it. The way that creativity manifests and gets out into the world is that it is completely original. It is in your bone marrow. It is your DNA. In the way that you interpret these four steps, right? The way that you interpret, being vulnerable or even, innovating or communicating is going to be authentic to you and to your experience. And that is what makes your individual product and service and your brand uniquely yours, because the way that you approach these things when a crisis occurs is going to give you a market differentiation. It's going to give you your identity. And that is why these things are so important to practice, because when a customer or something happens and somebody needs your particular expertise, there is a damn good reason why the phone is ringing when it's some high school kid on social that says something stupid. There's a reason that's ringing on your phone, Alex, and not the next guy or that next company. The reason is because somewhere deep down inside your construct, your DNA, there is a natural sort of approach to these four steps that allows your particular solution to ring true. And when your particular solution rings true, that attracts a certain clientele to you who understands innately, maybe even emotionally, that you are doing something that is of service. So I want your listeners to go, you know what? Creativity will help me not only market differentiate, but it'll help me provide value to the right customers and then bring them in so that I can offer my particular form of solution.
That's perfect, because, you make a great point. Thanks for checking me on that, because, these four things, if you just apply them like a checklist and you don't do it authentically, could just be the same as what we talked about before, right? It could be
another checklist.
And that's the last thing I need right now is another checklist. Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot here and ask you another question here. The last question here. We're going to get ready to wrap up. I know you're a busy man. Are there any other aspects of what you teach that beyond crisis, just in general for public relations and marketing folks in general, that they could learn from your book and that you really wish they understood more?
I would love for marketing people in PR, people in advertising, and so on and so forth, to start to understand the value of little victories. I love little victories. And so often we get so down on ourselves in our businesses, or our services or our missed targets, right? We have this like shining, goal on the top of the hill, and we're constantly trying to get there. But what we avoid and what we miss is those little victories that happen along the way that help us determine what the creative identity of who we are is trying to tell us. So for instance, if you're in PR and you really want to do, I don't know, books, right? You want to do, you want to be the top of the heap of book people. You want to work with the famous authors and all this stuff and put out their book. But every single job you have coming in is crisis management for, pharmaceutical companies. You got to at some point go, time out. Okay, I know I want to do books, but all of this business is coming in this way. It must be telling me something. And I want your listeners to start to appreciate the value of what that's telling you. A few years ago, there was an ice cream salesman that tried to sell, a bunch of ice cream machines. His construct was volume. I'm going to sell a bunch of these. And he wasn't doing that well. He wasn't selling that many machines, but he was like, that's my main goal. And I will not stop until I get there. And then one day he finds that there's a restaurant that, ordered a bunch of machines over and over again because they were breaking. They were making a lot of ice cream and milkshake. He gets over there, stands in line, lines out the door. He has one of their hamburgers, best cheeseburger he's ever had, right? The guy's name was Ray Kroc, and that restaurant was McDonald's. He listened to the little victories and became far more successful than if you would have just stayed an ice cream salesman. I want your listeners to look at their practice, look at their PR organization or marketing or whatever it is that they do, and understand that, hey, if I'm getting a lot of leads in this kind of category, or if I'm doing a lot of work in this channel, maybe those little victories are telling you where it is that you need to go.
Nir, see, that's why you write these great top-selling business books, and I don't, because it took me almost 10 years in business to figure out, you know what, Al, you need to focus on the stuff people are hiring, focus on those things. It's so great. Hey, tell us quickly, how do we, there'll be links in the show notes, but just if you wouldn't mind, how do we get a hold of you and find out more about what you're doing, and where do we buy this wonderful book?
Yes, sir. So it's on Amazon right now. It's called The Creator Mindset. I would love it if you were to pick up a copy and maybe leave me a nice review. That would be amazing. I am online. It's Nir Bashan, NIRBASHAN.com. There's a community that we started on there. We already have a bunch of people enrolled asking questions. It's totally free, and moderated. It's not, there's no, 99-cent for Viagra ads on there. It's it's a pretty nice community. You can join me on there, ask questions and get support. I would love to hear from your listeners. I've already gotten a few emails from the other show that we did together, Alex. So I know that you're a very successful podcaster and a very successful entrepreneur, and I would love to hear from your listeners.
Oh, that does my heart good. So PR After Hours virtual lounge listeners, my loungers, don't forget to get a hold of Nir. Let him know you heard it on PR After Hours. And by the way, if you want to hear that interview, it's on my sister show, Mysterious Goings On. It's a more lengthy interview, of course, because that's a longer format show, but you would get into some really deep concepts about creativity, and one of the most engaging conversations, frankly, I've ever had in my 4.5 years of doing that show. So again, you will find all the links in the show notes. Nir Bashan, I don't even know if I mentioned this going in. You are, we did season 1, 55 episodes since January. You are the kickoff season 2 episode. Thank you for making it fantastic.
Oh, cool. What an honor. I really appreciate that. And thanks for having me. You're a great interviewer, and, your literary background is very impressive. Your company's impressive, and the things that you do are really great. And I'm so very honored to be on the show, and I'm glad the message is resonating.
Oh, you know what that means? Looks like it's last call here at your virtual lounge for PR news, views, and interviews. Don't forget, you can ask me a question anytime. You can do it through our Twitter account, which is @HoursPR, or even better, you can send me a message vocally. I would love to hear your voice, and I'll answer it on the show. There's a link in the show notes. All you have to do is sign up through Anchor FM. It's free, doesn't take long, and you record your message. I get the message. I will play your audio. Just give me your first name and the city you live in, and then I will answer the question to the best of my ability right here on the show. Don't forget to, if you're enjoying this podcast, you can support it and help increase the frequency and value of the show. Just consider being a sponsor for your brand or your agency or just yourself, because you're like, I like this show. or just drop a few coins in the virtual tip jar. Either way, there's links in the show notes. Please check that out. All of that, of course, being in the show notes where you're listening right now or at prafterhours.com. I see that they're turning up the lights. Last call is over, and I've got to clean up this virtual lounge. And until next time, I'm Alex Greenwood, and you've been listening to PR After Hours on Anchor FM.